Hello, my name is Brandon Gibson, and I'm the Managing Director for Marble City Opera. I'd like to thank you for joining me for another edition of our Behind the Scenes video series. As I'm sure you've heard by now, the next opera that we are producing is Puccini's Tosca, a political thriller set in Rome during the Napoleonic Wars. Our production will take place on location at St. John's Cathedral, June 3rd through 5th at 7:30 each evening. And to reflect each of the different scenes that the opera depicts, our production will utilize 3 different locations at the cathedral. Just like any good political thriller, Tosca has a lot of moving parts. And instead of giving you pages of translations to follow or giving you a long speech before each act, we thought it'd be best to just sit down and explain to you what's going on beforehand, and also give you a little bit of history and context for the action so that you don't come into the show cold in June. So, with that said, I present to you today Tosca 101. As I mentioned before, Tosca is set in Rome during the Napoleonic Wars of the early 1800s. This was a time of large-scale political upheaval that engulfed much of Europe. The primary conflict, however, began between the French and British empires in northern Italy. In open violation of a prior peace treaty, Napoleon annexed and made himself president of northern Italy. He justified his actions by accusing the British of harboring fugitives and allowing the spread of anti-French propaganda. This sparked a string of conflicts that lasted nearly 12 and a half years. Thus the world that playwright Victorien Sardou chose for his play, La Tosca, written in 1887 as a star vehicle for the legendary actress Sarah Bernhardt. The play was reportedly so popular that it ran for an estimated 3,000 performances over 2 decades and toured across Europe. It also caught the eye of several composers who thought that it would make for an exciting libretto. Among those interested were Verdi, Franchetti, and of course, Puccini himself. Franchetti actually secured the rights first, and it was only due to some, let's call it maneuvering, by their shared publisher Tito Ricordi, that the rights were transferred at last to Puccini. At the time, critics thought that the play was too strong dramatically to make for a good libretto. In fact, on opening night, Puccini's peer, Mascagni, the famous composer of Cavalleria Rusticana, is quoted as saying this: "I have been victimized by poor librettos. Puccini is the victim of a libretto that is too good." Regardless, the opera became a huge success. Puccini and his librettist, Luigi Illica, worked hard to maintain the speed and intensity of the play in the opera. As such, the action all takes place during a single 24-hour period. In the interest of keeping the action moving, Puccini ignored several of the popular operatic conventions of the time. For example, in Act 3, the librettist wanted to give the tenor a long farewell aria, but Puccini strongly resisted because he felt it would slow down the action during the climax of the opera. The compromise was the short but incredibly moving aria, E luce van le stelle. plot centers around three characters. The first is obviously Floria Tosca. She is the title character of the opera and is the prima donna, or lead female singer, of Rome's opera company. The second is her lover, Mario Cavaradossi, a painter. The third is the corrupt chief of police, Baron Scarpia. Their interaction is a classic example of the old joke that says opera is when a soprano and a tenor want to be together, but are prevented from doing so by a baritone. So, Act 1. We begin in a large church in Rome. Someone comes running into the scene. It is Angelotti, and he has just escaped from prison. He is attempting to hide out in the church when in walks the painter, Cavaradossi. He has been commissioned to paint a picture of Mary Magdalene for the church. The sacristan, or caretaker of the church, wanders through the scene as well. Thinking that he's alone now, Cavaradossi breaks into his first aria, Recondita Armonia, where he muses about how the blonde woman in his portrait is different from his brunette girlfriend, Tosca. It is then that Angelotti reveals himself from his hiding spot. Because of the magic of theater, it turns out that the two are old friends, and Angelotti begs Cavaradossi to help him complete his escape. Just as he's about to, guess who walks in? You guessed it, Tosca. Tosca sees Cavaradossi's half-finished portrait and notices, it bears a striking resemblance to another well-known beauty around Rome, Marchesa Aravanti. Adding on to her suspicions, she could swear that he was whispering to someone before she walked in. Tosca, the diva that she is, gets jealous and is convinced that he is cheating on her with the Marchesa. Now, not wanting to rat out Angelotti, and maybe used to his lover's jealousy, he tries to calm her down by singing the aria Qual occhio al mondo, meaning, what eyes in the world could compare to yours? She calms down and leaves. Angelotti then pops out of his hiding place, and Cavaradossi shows him a secret way out of the church, gives him a key to his villa, and tells him about a well in his garden where he can hide. A cannon then goes off in the distance to signal that a prisoner has escaped, and knowing that it's him, Angelotti runs off, followed by Cavaradossi. The caretaker then returns with the church choristers, celebrating the news that Napoleon has been defeated in battle at Marengo. However, things quickly turn sour as Scarpia arrives with his lackeys. They believe Angelotti is hiding in the church. Scarpia interrogates the caretaker and learns that Cavaradossi has been there. This convinces him that he is on the right track. Tosca then comes back in looking for Cavaradossi, and Scarpia has the idea to make her jealous by showing her a fan that Marchesa Avanti left previously inside of the church. It works, and Tosca leaves angrily to confront Cavaradossi, unaware that she is being followed the entire time by Scarpia's men. As the chorus sings, Scarpia takes a moment to gloat over his deception during the epic Act 1 finale, Te Deum. This brings us to Act 2. Act 2 then takes place inside of Scarpia's posh apartment. He has requested that Tosca join him, and we find out that in between acts, he's managed to capture Cavaradossi, but not Angelotti. As Cavaradossi is being questioned, he hears the voice of Tosca in the next room. Unsurprisingly, he claims to know nothing about Angelotti, so he is taken into another room to be tortured. But Tosca catches sight of him before it happens, and he tells her, mum's the word, to keep quiet. Scarpia sees an opportunity then and makes a deal with Tosca. If she tells him where Angelotti is, he'll stop torturing Cavaradossi. Initially, she refuses, but when she hears her lover begin to scream from the next room, she confesses that Angelotti is hiding inside of a well in Cavaradossi's garden. The torture is called off, and guards bring Cavaradossi back in to experience Tosca's betrayal firsthand. Also, a policeman, Schiaroni, enters and lets everyone know that contrary to earlier reports, Napoleon actually won that battle at Marengo. Cavaradossi defiantly begins to gloat about it to Scarpia before he is dragged away, kicking and screaming. Now, even after obtaining the information that he came for, Scarpia just can't let it go. You see, he's always lusted for Tosca, and he seizes this moment to propose another bargain. If Tosca will sleep with him, he'll set Cavaradossi free. She's enraged and disgusted and refuses, but hearing the drumbeats outside that signal Cavaradossi's impending execution, she reluctantly consents. Singing the famous aria, Visi d'arte, or I Lived for Art, she laments her situation and asks God for intervention. At that moment, news arrives that Angelotti has actually killed himself, effectively eliminating the stakes for the deal. But Cavaradossi's execution is still scheduled to take place. In order to still get what he wants, Scarpia tells Tosca that he'll arrange for the execution to be faked. Tosca is not satisfied, however. She demands that he instead arrange safe passage for her and Cavaradossi out of Rome. Then, like a true diva, she makes him sign something to prove it. He relents and turns his back to write out a letter, ordering his men to use blank ammunition for the execution and provide safe passage afterwards for both Tosca and Cavaradossi. Tosca, meanwhile, quietly grabs a knife from a nearby table. Scarpia finishes the letter, signs it, and believing that he's won, turns around to claim his prize and rape Tosca just as she uses the knife to stab him to death. She then says that she forgives him, lights a candle, places a crucifix on his body, and flees the scene. This sets up the opera's final act, Act 3. There's a thick atmosphere of gloom as Act 3 opens. A young shepherd boy can be heard singing in the distance as bells chime for morning prayer. Cavaradossi is led out and told that he has an hour left to live. Instead of calling for a priest, the only thing that he asks for are the materials to write a letter to Tosca. He writes of his love to her and sings one of Puccini's great romantic arias, E lucevan le stelle, or The Stars Shone. Just as he finishes singing, Tosca arrives and quickly explains everything. The execution is going to be faked. The firing squad is going to use blanks, so all Cavaradossi has to do is pretend to die. They joyously sing of the life that they can now have together. And then, at the execution, Cavaradossi knows he just has to pretend to be dead when the firing squad shoots him. So the soldiers line up, they shoot, and he falls. Falls rather too convincingly. Tosca is initially impressed by his acting skill, but when he doesn't move and she inspects closer, she realizes the truth. Scarpia has had the last laugh after all, and he made sure in his orders that the soldiers used real bullets. Off stage, there was a shout from one of the soldiers. They've discovered Scarpia's body. And as she hears the sounds of the soldiers approaching, Tosca begins to scream, "O Scarpia, avanti a Dio! O Scarpia, we meet before God." And then, well, for the end, you'll just have to join us and find out. Again, our production of Tosca will take place nightly, June 3rd through 5th, at St. John's Cathedral. In-person seating will still be socially distanced and limited. However, performances will also be streamed online. For tickets and other information, visit www.marblecityopera.com/tickets. I hope you've enjoyed this peek behind the scenes. Again, my name is Brandon Gibson, and I look forward to seeing you at a performance soon. Take care.
Oh